Here we are with Professor Igor Mayer, who will be a keynote speaker in a serious game for policymaking at the Crossover International Conference on Policymaking 2.0, which will take place in Dublin from June 17 to June 18. And Igor is a senior associate professor in the Faculty of Technology, Policy and Management at the Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. And hi Igor, and how are you?
Hi, good, Francesco.
Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, well, as you said, I am Dutch. I work at the Delft University of Technology, which is one of the three engineering universities in the Netherlands. My background is not in engineering. My background is in public administration, policy sciences. So I'm a social scientist. But I've always been very fascinated by how people learn in a context of decision making, and that brought me to the area of gaming as a method to support that. Well, I do all the things that people do at universities. I teach serious game design. In addition to that, I run a little group and a production lab that builds, designs, and supports the use of games for policy making and advanced forms of learning. And I do a lot of research, and once in a while I also speak at conferences or workshops. I think that's basically it.
Yeah, very well. Could you please us explain so how does your expertise apply to policy making in general?
Well, policy making in general is a lot about people interacting. It is about policymakers and politicians interacting with each other, but it is also about policymakers and politicians interacting with stakeholders, non-governmental groups, businesses, and it is also, of course, not in the least, interacting with citizens through all kinds of means. And this interaction can be complicated, but out of this interaction, decisions come, and that is really at the heart of what policy making is. And basically what I do and what my expertise allows me to do is to create this interaction between politicians, policymakers, stakeholders and citizens. And I do this in a little bit of a creative, original way. I use the language and the technology of games to design this interaction. And the assumption is that by using the language of a game and the technology of a game, you take people out of their daily lives, out of their frames that they may be stuck in. You can change reality. You can focus on the problems that you think really matter. So you create a little bit of an alternative world where time has been compressed and space maybe have been changed. And the assumption is, in my work, is that helps and supports the interaction between these stakeholders in the context of policymakers. And of course, then we assume that in the end, we have better decisions and better policies and better designs. So I'm using a little bit of a method or a trick, which is the trick of gaming to make better decisions.
Okay. So you think that by using gaming you can also increase the participation and the engagement of policymakers?
Yeah, that is the assumption. That could be the case when that is considered to be an important problem. So if you define that in a certain policy process the engagement is blocking the real decision making or good decision making, then you can use game techniques to increase the engagement. So there is always a relation between diagnosis of what you think is the problem and the way you use games. And in a way, games are so yeah, you know, they're like rubber. You can bend them in all kinds of ways. You can use them for all kinds of purposes. And sometimes you shouldn't use them. There is also a lot of cases do something else. Do a good expert study, do a good simulation model, do good surveys, whatever. But once in a while, games can be a good technique to help policymakers or to help the policy-making process.
Mm. And do you see much of participation of policymakers when you try to do a serious gaming exercise?
Yes, at least that is a little bit the area where I work in and where I specialize in. There is a lot of discussions about using games for education, or in the classroom, or for children, for learning math, or for learning to write, or for interaction. That's not so much my expertise. My expertise is really in the field of policy games, or games in the context of policy making. So in many of the games, most of the games that I use, real policymakers participate. And that can also be real policymakers in combination with scientists or researchers or stakeholders or whatever. So the whole notion of who is a policymaker is actually already quite flexible, because you can assume that also the people that work at non-governmental organizations or in business or whatever, when they interact with public decision making, they're also becoming policymakers. So yes. But it can be a challenge to get real policymakers into a policy game. But you have to realize that I am very, very seldom the initiator of the project. So that is maybe a little bit of a difference with games in education, is where maybe the teacher or some educational institution thinks, okay, my kids will benefit when I give them a game to teach them math. But the teacher sort of decides that the children need to play it or want to play it, or they benefit from playing it. In my case, it's very much that a policymaker or an institution is stuck with a problem.
Okay, so they ask for advice.
So the initiative is coming already from people that already feel the pressure or feel the problem, and they say, okay, maybe we can play this out. Maybe we can try this in a simulated environment, and I will invite the stakeholders to come and play the game with me or with other people, and then we will talk about it, what we learned, and how we can use these lessons for reality. So I am sort of more the enabler. I am the facilitator, and I provide the solutions, but I'm not the person who will say, okay, I see you have a problem, come and play my game. No, it's not my game. It's the game of the people who are already in that network, already have the problem.
I see. Yeah, this is very interesting. So it's really the people in the problem that ask for your advice and are looking for a solution from you.
Yeah. So I'm a little bit like an academic consultant that use my method and my tricks of games to help a process or to help a network a little bit further. I'm also very modest in what you can achieve with games, because it's not like any other methods, like a simulation model or whatever. It's not like, okay, I have a big world problem, I put some people into a game, and when they come out of it, the problem solved, the world looks different, whatever. That's not the case. It's not the case with a survey, it's not the case with one project, it's not the case with a model or a simulation. So it's really step by step you try to change a little bit. But still, that doesn't make it irrelevant, or it doesn't make it... still you can have, within a certain time frame or a certain thing, you can have impact. Only it doesn't mean that world problems are solved.
Okay, I see. And could you please describe some real-life applications of your methodologies?
Yeah, what I specialize in, and that is a little bit coming from the fact that I work at an engineering university. I always explain it that my field of application is mostly mostly in the field where technology joins political decision making, or the other way around. So I use a lot of my game techniques in the world of what you would call infrastructure decision making. Now, infrastructure decision making can be, well, in the Netherlands, for instance, water management. So flooding, safety against flooding. So levees or dikes in the Netherlands. You know, these levees that protect us and keep the water outside. Well, they need to be maintained. We need to decide where we build them. We need to decide how high they can be. We need to decide whether maybe we give a little bit more space to the river to flow over when there is a lot of rain.
Yeah.
So water management is an area where we use a lot, and actually there is in the Netherlands quite a lot of policy gaming about water management decision making. You can imagine that in the field of water management, there is a lot of stakeholders involved in deciding how we manage the rivers, the canals, the dikes, the levees, how we make sure our urban areas are protected. And there are so many stakeholders and so many rules that the real situation almost already looks like a game. So what we and also some other institutions do is to recreate that into a game where we take all the stakeholders and play it out in order to get information, to get analysis, to get preparation for strategic decision making. Now, another example, for instance, is in the field of, much related is also urban planning. It can also be markets. So, for instance, energy markets. How does, as an effect of the liberalization and the privatization of energy markets in the Netherlands, how they do this option trading and, for instance, these what's that called? These climate things. How does that work? How do these markets work?
Yeah.
What is the strategic behavior on these markets, and can we simulate this behavior on the markets already to anticipate how we design these markets and this trading? You could also think about supply chains of goods and services all over the world. You could think in the field of emergency management, crisis management.
Yeah.
So when you need to train, for instance, first responders. So there's the people that go into a crisis situation when there has been an incident or an accident or a crisis, and they need to respond because an airplane has crashed or there has been an explosion.
Yeah, of course.
So that is operational training, but operational training also means that there is at the tactical level and at the strategic level, the commanders, they also sort of direct and manage the people at the operational level. It also has to do with moving around the ambulances and the resources in a crisis situation, or to make sure you have enough capacity in your hospitals.
Yeah.
So this is a very important example. Let me think of another one. Well, one project that I'm working on, and maybe if you want a good example that I like very much, is the area of marine spatial planning. Marine spatial planning is actually an area that is under development, and it's actually urban planning at sea.
Urban planning.
So what we are doing in many countries is we use the space that we have at sea for more and more human functions. So we build wind farms, we start drilling for oil, there is shipping routes, all these things, and these human functions and these claims, they tend to take space in the sea, and they conflict with each other, or sometimes they can also be combined. And now the question is, for instance, how do we manage this increasing pressure on the ecosystem and the marine area in the Mediterranean or at the North Sea or in the Baltic? And how do we make sure also, for instance, that the many countries that use the area in the Mediterranean, so Italy, Spain, Greece, now the North Arabic countries. How do we make sure that they don't interfere and that the ecosystem of the Mediterranean has a long-term future? You know, that we don't overuse the ecology.
The resources.
Now, all these things are sort of almost like games in reality already. And what we do, these are really examples that we work in, is we try to recreate them and let policymakers actually play with these issues and see what comes out.
I see. Do you think that this kind of approach could also face problems at a higher level? For example, if we think about global warming, in maybe 200 years, the level of the sea, it will be 10 meters higher, something like that. So probably the Netherlands will have to adapt a lot to this new situation. So do you think that your approach could be used also to train policymakers in the future for dealing with these massive high-level problems?
Yeah, that is already being done. 200 years is really far.
Yeah, of course. But
200 years is an unimaginable time horizon. And it's also, I think, not very useful to think so far. But if you take a little bit closer to now, like 2050, 2070 maybe, then that is being done. And you, as a technique of gaming, you very much rely also on other techniques like scenario building. Scenario building, like creating imaginable futures and then seeing how you can respond to that imaginable future. It is also very close to computer simulations. So if we have climate models that give us predictions on what might happen with sea level rising in the next 50 years, then that is the data. That is the analytical part of trying to understand what might happen. But the human part of it, the political and social part of it, is still not being addressed by that analytical approach, like, okay, we will know and the computer models predict that it will sink. The question, therefore, is how do we create our institutions and how do we try to prepare ourselves for this potential sea level rising? And there is where gaming comes in. So there is institutions also worldwide. For instance, the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis in Luxembourg, or other institutions that try to create combinations of games, simulations, scenario techniques, a lot of data to let stakeholders, politicians play with the future. For instance, in the field of climate change or sea level things. So that is already being done, and that is an important area of application.
Perfect. Okay. So that would be all, and we look forward to hear from you at the conference in Dublin.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to come and to share more of these things and thoughts, and I will see you then.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Francesco.
Bye-bye.
Bye.